he actually has a different takedown game every fight, and that is just bonkers to me. Like, it's, yeah, he's got his like his old favorites and all the rest of it, like we're seeing right here. You know what I mean? But he actually chops and changes a lot. Like we're seeing like almost like a reinvigorated Khabib, and in his early career it was just dive on a single leg, hope for the best. And now there's just like all sorts of crazy nuance, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess we want to start off with the Barboza fight, but I suppose before we get there, like just broadly, in fact, we're straight into it. Okay, so talk to me. Let me just hit pause right here, right now. So this position. So first of all, most fights are going to have some kind of cage interaction at some point. It's extremely rare if you don't see that.
Yeah.
So what have we got? What are we looking at here positionally? First of all, as a breakdown before we see this first takedown.
Yeah, so Khabib is obviously, he's just an offensive cage wrestler. There's very few times you're going to see Khabib with his back to the wall. And I think if you're going to break down wall wrestling, I think it's worth sort of trying to think about the difference between upper and lower body takedowns. And upper body takedowns are where you're going to try and really work super hard to secure your grips. And you're going to either have yourself a body lock or an over-under. And Khabib has an over-under here because he's got his hands locked around Barboza's right arm. If you're talking about lower body takedowns, you're talking about somebody locking their hands around their legs beneath the hips, and it really does come down to A, can I get my hands locked around, and then you've got yourself an easy double, you know, or B, where do I chain wrestle to if I can't lock my hands around their hips, or their upper thighs at least. When it comes to the body lock takedowns, what Khabib is an absolute master of, and something that I would just preach to the cows come home, is once you've got your hands locked, that is for control. And then you fight with your legs. So you lock them and control them with your arms, and you take them down with your legs. And this is super, super interesting because a lot of takedowns we're going to look at today, that's going to be an absolute perfect display. And I believe, if this is the one that I think it is, he's actually going to do an inside reap with his right leg here when Barboza tries to fight with the knee. So great control with the upper body.
Head positions aren't quite tight as well. His eyebrows are fixed to Barboza like cement.
Absolutely. Barboza does a good job getting his knee in. Khabib recognizes it. Inside reap, turns the angle. Lovely stuff.
So just coming back and playing that normal speed for people, what was it specifically that Khabib did here to get the takedown?
Okay, yeah. So one thing that I think is just before we press play that's super, super, super important to recognize, if we can go back a fraction, maybe. Super important to recognize is maybe further forward a little bit, freeze, maybe a bit more. Bit more, freeze. Okay, perfect. Okay, so Khabib's got his right hand underhook, his shoulders super deep, his head position super tight, and Barboza is concertinaed to his right hand side, Khabib's left hand side. You can see that they're leaning in one specific direction. Now, Jack, if you're Barboza and you're being dragged down to Khabib's left, where are you fighting super hard to take your body?
I'm trying to push out to the opposite side because I'm getting dragged down there.
Absolutely. So Barboza is working incredibly hard here to push off his right leg and drive his head back up the cage to stop him from being taken down. Khabib's done a great job of getting his right knee against the cage here, and that means that if Barboza's going to have any chance of not being taken down, not only is he going to have to posture up super hard and use that whizzer, but he's also going to have to use his left knee to try and off-balance Khabib's knee that's against the fence, because Khabib is essentially dragging him over that knee, right? Khabib's got great control, and he's dragging him to the left. So if Barboza gives him momentum to the right, Khabib's right, do you know what I mean? Then what Khabib could do here is he recognizes, right, if I drag Barboza in this direction to the right, if I drag him that way, then he's going to step back on his left foot and hold his balance. So what do I have to do? I have to use my right foot. I have to inside reap, I have to hook that knee, and I have to make sure that as your weight pops back up with your momentum, as your weight drives to the opposite side, that there's no basing leg there, and that you're going to end up getting the takedown. What we see here is Barboza's left knee interacting with Khabib. Khabib drags him up, and then he's going to pull that leg out so that he completes the takedown.
So Khabib's going. He's got his loop created. He's trying to push him down to the left. Mm-hmm. When he realizes, because Khabib's obviously strong, that Barboza is defending enough, he says, "Great, I'm now going to rip in the complete other direction." And he's taking out this post here, this left leg.
Yeah, and just again, so look, freeze. Okay, look at this, right? So you can see almost a motion blur of Hector Barboza driving super hard off his right leg. That right leg that's just out of shot a little bit is driving him up super hard. And Khabib, what he's going to do is not only pull, but he's going to let the momentum go, and he's going to turn to his right. And what's nice about this is Khabib's going to essentially land between Barboza and the cage, which means it's going to be very hard for Barboza to get back up. and the side that Khabib has the underhook is out in the open, so Khabib's going to be in an even more dominant position. And I guarantee you that he's drilled this, but I wouldn't be surprised if Khabib did something like this on purpose because he respects Barboza's ability to get back up, or it could just be that it's just way more efficient. I push you left, I go right. Why would I drag you left all the way through if I can just switch the angle?
And what's interesting to me as well is like the position of Khabib's right leg. It looks almost slightly, I don't know if reaped is the right word to describe it, but it's not like he's just in a pure hamstring curl.
Yep.
It is slightly off at like a 45-degree angle to get that.
100%. I think this would actually be quite hard if Barboza just decided, instead of posturing up, I just hang. Do you know what I mean? If I just drop my weight here, or if I just try and like accept that I'm going to go to the right, which obviously you wouldn't, but like, you know, I think that actually that this really, really does come off the fact that Barboza is trying incredibly hard to build this height back up and win that vertical position.
Excellent. And then when we hit play, we see there's some that he switches, then he switches back. Just watch that in full motion, actually. I mean, he just seems he's so good at, and even that entrance, right? I mean, like, I don't know if what a striking coach would think of that entrance or not, but he just gets in. He's just so good at moving his weight from one side to the other, right? Like,
I bet you that's planned as well, because Barboza is notorious for struggling with pressure fighters. If Barboza has space to work his kicks, I mean, we saw the wheel kick of Terietim. He's an amazing fighter. So the blueprint for Barboza was written with pressure, and how much more pressure can you get than a freaking flying knee?
Exactly. Now, with this
position.
This is about 3 takedowns. So just to summarize that principle there, I guess, would you say that it's you're pushing one way, they overcompensate, then you move back the other way to secure a takedown as a principle?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the key thing that you're thinking here is, A, where is their momentum? B, what can I do with their momentum? How can I enhance their momentum? If Khabib's dragging left and Barboza's standing up, okay, right, at the moment, there is no momentum because there's just a fight versus a fight. It's 1 versus 1 and we're at a stalemate. But if Khabib releases that pressure, then Barboza starts to stand up at a force of 1. But if Khabib releases that pressure and then pushes Barboza, well, now you've got Barboza going at a force of 2 in the opposite direction.
Brilliant. And so that's takedown number 1. But before we move to takedown number 2, I just want to touch on Khabib's consolidation once he completes a takedown, because takedown is only valuable if you can then turn it into something that progresses your game plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
If Barboza's bounces straight back up, what's the point of it? So I did this because immediately you can see Khabib's head coming down. And what's Khabib's like consolidation priorities say? It'd be good to get your thoughts on that. Like let me just see if I can actually slow down the playback speed on this as well, so we can see.
Right now, before we even move on,
what are you saying?
So, the nature of this takedown means that Khabib is looking like he's going to land in a half guard position, right? So it's going to be half guard Barboza's right leg as he falls to the mat. There's 2 things even before we press play here that are amazing. First of all, it's like, look how linear their body position is. Like, Barboza is very, very flat, like very, very flat, and Khabib is very, very flat. Like, they're not really on their sides, which is what you really need to be able to stand up. If you have half guard on Barboza's right leg, then you need your head on his left side. You need opposing side. And Khabib is not just falling flat to flat, chest to chest, like we all know is great. He has his underhook in a good position. But look, his head's in a phenomenal position. That is cross-body pressure. That is going to be Barboza's right hip neutralized by the half guard position of his legs, and Barboza's left shoulder neutralized by the head position of Khabib. Like, if you're going to get a pin, you want one hip, one shoulder, opposite sides of the body. Perfect.
And so then if he wasn't in half guard and he was falling more into full guard in the center, where would you want Khabib's head to be there? The left, the right, or just...
So again, that's going to depend on what Barboza does, but really just under his jaw, and then you'd be ragging his feet away from the cage, okay? Because if they landed in full guard, now what Barboza can do is start to shift his hips left and right.
Okay.
So as soon as he can shift his hips left or right, what you want is those hips away from the cage, so there's no easy stand-up.
So what's interesting to me is we're thinking cross-lateral pressure before he even hits the ground if you think you're going to fall in half guard.
Yes, cross-body pressure. Yeah, absolutely.
Cross-body pressure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's see the sequence. Certainly comes down.
Good.
Okay, and it skips off straight away.
Yeah. But I mean, like, the job's done. And at that point in time there, like, Khabib's on his knee, and it looks like Barboza might have even gone back to full guard. But the bottom line is here, Freeze, is that, like, Khabib's going to flatten his torso with his head. Barboza's already doing the right thing, which is trying to get his shoulders up against the fence. But even if we sort of take away what is perfect grappling in this scenario, like, you have got Khabib on top of you, and you're known as a striker. Right? He's done the majority of the work. When we talk about our 80-20 principles, 80% of the work is done there. Do you know what I mean? Like, he is in his realm. They're no longer on the feet. How much threat do you think Khabib feels right now compared to, say, 15 seconds before this?
Probably infinitely less.
Right.
So infinitely less.
Right. And for Barboza, let's switch it around. What do you think is going through Barboza's mind right now?
Get up at all costs.
Yeah. Maybe even a bit of panic.
Especially he's less than 2 minutes into the fight at the stage as well. So he's not tight fresh. He's popping.
They're dry. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be even hard to slip around and move. And one thing that tells me that Barboza's having a bad time here is he's pulling Khabib's head onto him. Do you know what I mean? That he's not creating extra space. He's not using his hands committed to the floor. He's holding on for dear life. And that just shows to me I don't want to be here, man. I just do not want to be here. I don't want to get punched by you. I don't want you to posture up and shoot on me.
So that's a really good segue into this takedown. So watch it unfold first so people can see.
Yeah. Okay, not my favorite takedown because I think that there might be a little bit of an element of the cage bounce. Khabib obviously just super sticky, incredible climb here.
Relentless for the takedown.
Yeah. This one, if this is the one that I think it is, let me have a look. Yeah, I think it is. If this is one of my favorite takedowns of all time, if you pause it. Right. Okay. So
I've got a question for you before you share that. Is at this point here, Khabib's look at the spinal position of Khabib actually here.
Mm-hmm.
Just intuitively, it feels almost wrong that he's diving into his head.
Yeah.
I'd feel almost like deadlift wise, you want your spine pointing upwards. So are we just missing something? Is this what are we saying here?
So I've got a couple of theories about this, but I have to admit I'm kind of on the spot here. So one of the things that I would say is with Barboza being such a dynamic striker, and being so explosive, I wonder if part of Khabib, because one of the things that you're vulnerable to in this exact position is the switch, which would be where Barboza takes his left overhooking arm, reaches around and goes through. But I don't think Khabib's afraid of that. I think if I was in Khabib's mind right now, I'd be thinking, I do not want you to do this to me.
The Travis Brown. Yeah, Travis Brown.
And if you look at this position at the moment, Khabib clearly can't get his hands locked. Barboza's got heavy head position. Do you know what I mean? He's got his underhook. He's got his overhook. Barboza really has everything that he needs right here. Do you know what I mean? So if I was in Khabib's mind, maybe I'm thinking, first of all, one thing, no elbows. And second of all, I need to pin you to the fence so that you can't use that underhook effectively. Do you know what I mean? I'm driving through. I'm keeping you nicely pinned here. And what is really interesting is the takedown that we're going to see here is incredibly unorthodox. It's really something that I've literally never, ever, ever, ever seen before. And it's a fantastic solution for this particular problem. So if we move forward, it could be a number of reasons why it could also be just taking a rest. It's round 3, bro.
That's a good detail. That's a really good point.
Not that Khabib really takes rests, but look at this.
Wow.
Unbelievable. I've played with this in the sparring room a lot. Barboza does a fairly good job, but it's over. So
because it looks like they've got a bit of a stalemate happening here, right? He's pushed in, he's got the defense. And why do you think this takedown works in this scenario then?
Okay, so a couple of things, right? So if you freeze for something, so what I really liked about this here is Khabib just kind of telegraphed what it is that he really wanted there. So he did this little shift to the left before resetting himself center. When he moves to the left, what he's thinking is his left arm. Okay, right, he's really confident with his shoulder position of his right arm. That's his underhook. That's what he's going to consolidate with, right? His head's on the left, his underhook's on the right. When they hit the floor, he wants his head in his chest, he wants to keep his underhook. So what Khabib really wants here is to use his left arm to pull Barboza's right knee, the one that's underneath that underhook, and he wants to pull it to the other leg. And he says, right, okay, I'm in this position. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my weight over to that side, see if I can get a little bit of extra power. You know what I mean? Little tester, not quite working. Barboza's done a fantastic job of gluing that foot towards the cage, and he's very heavy on it. Look at Barboza's head position. It's heavy over that foot, and that means that leg is going to be very difficult to move. Okay, but Khabib wants that leg. Okay, he wants that leg, and he wants it because the underhook's on that side. He's not switching off to a single because the underhook's there. I mean, that's a very popular takedown for Khabib. It's just, you see that in the Ali Quinta fight, he switches to a single leg. He brings his left hand to his right hand, switches to the single. Can't really do that because of the underhook. So, can't lock his hands, can't go to the single leg, doesn't want to go to the body lock. What's left? Okay, I'm going to do something super fancy. And what he does, again, beautiful piece of cage wrestling here, takes his left foot and he peels Barboza's foot off the cage just long enough for it to become weightless. And when it does become weightless, then freeze. What he's going to do there is that left side, that left arm, he's going to drag the knee all the way to the other foot. If we look at Barboza's extended leg, okay, he's going to drag the right leg to the left leg, and he's going to consolidate the two of them, take his base away, and Barboza's going to have no choice but to carry his weight with his arm.
Wow.
So let's have a quick look. Look, peels it away, drags the legs together. You've got a human Brazilian flag there, and Khabib just shifts his hips out to make sure that he can consolidate position. If we can watch that as super slow motion.
Let's get that. And just while pulling out a slow-mo, tell me then, so are you happy with what Barboza's doing defensively there? Has he got the right sort of idea?
So, again, like, it's difficult to say, like, oh, what would you do against Khabib? But I could give you a couple of options here. So if we just pause for a split second.
So he's got this over-under defense, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things here, right? So Khabib is not going to be able to lock his hands here. That's established. Barboza's got an underhook. And so I would say there's two options that Barboza has here. But that's a great question because, you know, you're talking about how do I beat Khabib? It's like, well, 30 people tried, you know. So what I would advise here is a couple of things. Number one, he could take his left overhook, that left arm, and he could bring it over and try and hit what's called the switch, where he brings his arm over the body and underneath Khabib's left leg to try and elevate the knee, step through, and rotate him onto his back. Okay, this is very, very difficult to communicate without graphics or yeah. But essentially, he could hit the switch. Option number two. Khabib is really, really strong, but with a right underhook underneath the shoulder, when you try and lift somebody up with that shoulder position, you're lifting their torso. The shoulder is essentially the same part of the body. Okay, so what he's doing there is he's fighting Khabib's torso, whereas actually what he really would like to be doing is fighting the limb. So what he could do here is he takes that right hand, and again, like this is something that I work on a lot, but again, it's hard against somebody like Khabib who's smushing you into the cage there from the last round, tired, all the rest of it. But if he took his right hand and he slid it down Khabib's bicep towards the elbow and crowbarred the elbow up, not the shoulder, the elbow, what you could start to do there is create a little bit of rotation, a little bit of a turn, a little bit of an open side that you could maybe then start to scoot your hips out. Now, would Khabib then just transition off? Who knows? Would he switch to an over-under clinch up the upper body? But at least, you know, you're not getting taken down with what happens. So lifting the elbow or going for the switch here.
and it's true because any defense you've got spawns a number of infinite possibilities of counterattacks, right? Which is...
Especially with Khabib. And that, like, look, he moves in that direction, which would kill the switch anyway. Do you know what I mean? That's him trying. You see him trying to pull. Do you know what I mean? It's not quite working here. Okay, now, look, steps across. Okay, he uses his left foot now and his left hand. Then he's going to shoot that left foot in. Beautiful. Really, really, I don't know, where do you even think to come up with this?
It's really nice.
Drags it off and then drags the legs together so that he posts on his hand. And Barboza does a good job of catching himself before he hits the floor, but it's a bit inevitable.
And I want to zone in on this question as well. So they've got the second technique here, but Barboza here, for example, this position, I think, like in most cage exchanges, usually you see this at least like 2 out of 10 times at the very minimum. What's Barboza's? If you're Khabib and you want to complete this takedown and consolidate,
yeah,
what are you doing? Are you bringing the legs out to the front so Barboza collapses down? What's the best offensive pathway from here?
So what Khabib does here is not necessarily what I would do, but that's... Well, who the hell am I? What Khabib does here is, if you can see at the moment, you've got Barboza is very much on his side. So he's got his right shoulder controlled by his right hand, and he's got his right hip and his right hip facing the floor. He's definitely not flat at all. And we can see, you know, in the last takedown, Khabib really wants you flat when you hit the floor. So what Khabib does just before this clip ends is he actually pulls his hips away and he dumps him onto his butt. And this is a position when you've got both hips on the floor and you're sat on your bum. It's a much more familiar for a cage wrestler. Okay, and then you can start to look at triangling the legs. Like, triangling the legs up here is going to be very difficult because all he'd have to do is pull his right knee to the cage and then he's in his get-ups. Do you know what I mean? But at the moment, if Khabib just shucks the hips out and gets him to sit down, that's great. One of the things that we have our guys doing, if they're a little bit taller than this, if a little bit stood up, is if I've got your hips really well locked, if I run to my left and I actually bring your hips in front of your fingertips, you know, your hand works very well like this, doesn't work at all like this. Do you know what I mean? So if you've got the space and maybe there's a little bit more open, then maybe you can rag the hips around, run to the fingertips, and then what will happen is the person against the cage will collapse. Khabib, hard to argue against somebody who's such a master of this position. And if we watch it again in a little bit slower motion, you'll see what he does is a big shock of the hips to try and get him to sit on his bum. So watch here. Yeah, nice. And then look. He's like, okay, right, this guy's holding himself up. I can't afford him to get that right leg underneath him to stand up.
So that's good detail. It's the right leg, because that's how we would build height, right? It's that right leg, so that's the key priority.
Yeah, you see, look, he tries to dump him down so that he's sitting, so it's a little bit more familiar. He can start to collect the legs.
It's interesting, and we'll let this free flow till we find a clip that we want to zoom in on and stuff. But it feels like a lot of these takedowns against the phones, which is more Khabib style.
This one's amazing. Sorry to
this one. No, it's just they're all so good, right?
This is one that we literally worked on the other day, bro.
I remember this, bro. And it's straight into the Dagestani, right?
Yeah.
It feels like a lot of the takedowns against the fence, like, is usually just there's an understanding of posts and their position and what makes them collapse. Is almost everything we're looking at is fundamental to that. Like we're attacking, the head, the hips, and the knees, but also this lateral movement. So like if you can't attack the hips, you're going down to the legs, and actually being confident enough to spin around and rotate to complete the attacks. Because Khabib looks like he's fluent from almost every angle and every position. He's not. In fact, should we get this one in slow motion so we can break this one down?
This is genuinely another. I mean, like Khabib's just genuinely a master. So, like, look, first of all, drives his shoulder under the underhook and drives the fence. If you just pause here for a split second, I mean, look at the body angle of Khabib. They say when you have an underhook, your shoulder should be beneath their shoulder, and like Khabib is not. Look, he's not tall. He's actually like completely on his side here. Like he's actually looks like he's in a less dominant spine position. But actually, what he's saying here is, look, instead of having my head up, I have my shoulder up. If you freeze here and look at this, like look, the highest point of him is his right shoulder. I mean, his head's low because it's the shoulder that needs to be in position. He actually, he could have his eyebrows underneath Barboza's jaw here, but no, he chooses to have his head hang low so that his shoulder can be higher. And that's a ridiculously critical detail because if his head's up, then Barboza can be heavy on the underhook, but his shoulder's up, and so Barboza is really going to be struggling to be heavy on that underhook.
I was just about to ask why he hasn't got the head pressure there, but he did that just to limit that underhook. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
really interesting, right? Because look, if I put my eyebrows on you, although I have a great head position here, what I don't have is the ability to keep that shoulder super high. So actually, if I'm listening to your opposite shoulder, look how much taller my underhook could be. And Khabib's, he's not locked his hands yet. He actually has his hands super high up, which again is going to make it really difficult for Barboza. The elbow rotating outwards like this, and we can see Khabib's fingertips here. He's actually got his palms on the wall. That is going to make it very difficult for Barboza to clamp down and kill that underhook. And you can see, look, we say like you want your underhook high, the other person's underhook low. Like that is a typical example of somebody winning that battle. Hands locked. Now it's time. So freeze for a second. Okay, so we talk about control, then attack. So when Khabib's got his hands locked, okay, here, does he have good control of the upper body?
This guy has got a full lock, hasn't he?
He's got great control. Okay, his underhook's high. Okay, his head position is actually reinforced by his shoulder against his jaw here, so he's actually pretty comfortable. And now what you'll see is I've won my head battle, I've won my arm battle, I've got to win the knee battle next. Okay, so goes to get his knee into the center, tries to drag Barboza down. Barboza, strong as you like, really does not want to be dragged down. Really strong right leg position. Khabib brings his knee high up the fence to get his toes behind the knee. This is super important. If Khabib's trying to get his leg behind, he doesn't want to capture the calf. And now from here, Barboza, tough position. And what Khabib's going to do is drag the leg away, and that forces Barboza into this sort of like half squat / losing the position. And down he goes.
So I guess that my question would be, why did Khabib not kind of rotate 90 degrees and kind of hamstring curl? It kind of felt like he just moved him backwards a little bit and collapsed him down into it, didn't he, with that?
I mean, I wonder if this is like, I mean, we have got literally 2 minutes left of the last round, and you've had a Khabib maul you for the entire time. I wonder if Barboza was just literally too tired to.
I mean, maybe he didn't need to. Maybe he just collapsed down, right? And again, he's trying to Dagestani right there.
If we go back as well, like there's two things to recognize in that particular takedown. The first one is that Barboza didn't hop with his other leg. He just literally accepted being taken down. And the second thing is just look at Barboza's face, man. Like if you freeze frame, look at that, man. Like that is pure anguish.
He's like, God damn, bro, for goodness sake.
And then as they go down, like you're just gonna see like the face of a guy who's just having like the worst time ever. Like if you say you get Khabib'd, that is the face
that is
getting Khabib'd.
And to be fair, I've just realized, because we're watching this at 0.25 speed, when you play it all back to back, this stuff's happening so quickly. Like these positions, it's not like it's just like it's happening like in 10 minutes. It's happening so quickly.
This has been happening for 15 minutes for poor
Oh
Barboza
gosh,
here,
you know how exhausting it can
Look,
be, right?
lost the shoulder battle, lost the hand battle, lost the knee battle. It's all happened in half a second. You know what I mean?
But one bit that doesn't make sense to me, I suppose, would be this takedown here. So the first thing he went for, there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the actual plan there? Because like it feels like Barboza can keep hopping with that right leg, right? So he's not trying to do a judo takedown. I mean, what is this takedown that we're seeing here that Khabib's initially going for?
There's a couple of things that spring to my mind, but like the first one is if you just get your knee in the front. I mean, look at Khabib's angle of his body here. Like he's got his knees and feet facing in one direction. He clearly wants to say, I want to drag you here. And I wonder if Khabib has actually tried to drag him off the fence here for a turn into the inside. But the other thing is that like when he drags him down like this, his right shoulder becomes super high again. Do you know what I mean? So when he first locked his hands, he started to lose a little bit of that shoulder position. But when they lean down like this, Khabib's shoulder again is the highest point of his body. And if you just look at Barboza's spine and arm position here, like he's got no real decent defensive options at the moment. Like all he can do is try and stand back up. And while he stands back up, Khabib can then win the next battle. So if you imagine a timestamp, Khabib's attacking like in this sort of rhythmic sort of like hand fight, knee fight, like drag down, hand, these sort of things, right? And what Barboza is doing is he's always one clap behind. He's like, try and win the underhook, I've lost. Try and win the hand, I've lost. Try and win the head, I've lost. Try and win the knee, I've lost. And then he's like, okay, now I'm going to get dragged down. So while Barboza spends the time getting back tall, Khabib spends the time winning the leg battle. He's almost like, when they say, oh, somebody's a step ahead, this is like a prototypical example.
This is the perfect example of that being the case, right?
Look, Barboza works himself back to tall. Khabib's got his leg position. Barboza doesn't even post hard, man. He's not even overhooking with the other hand. At that point, he's just having a bad time.
It's interesting. We'll let this sort of like play on the background and stuff, but it's amazing how much of Khabib's style is wrestling centric against defense. We've just not really seen that from many other fighters actually in the UFC. He really kind of pioneered that approach. And you also say like cage wrestling is almost like a fourth discipline alongside the ground game, the stand up, and just the typical wrestling exchanges, because we see a lot of like wrestlers that are great, but like it's not the same as being great against the fans. You have to really practice that discipline.
We should break that down next week. That's one of my favorite.
Let's play that.